ready. We're prepared. Do not give in to fear. We are fearless. This is not the time to be afraid. This is a time to stand up and fight back and to resist any temptation for them to divide us. We're in this together. The rule of law is on our side. We will not give in, not give up. We will not capitulate. We will not bow. We will not bend. We will survive.
And we're joined by a man who has been studying our political history for quite some time. He is a distinguished professor of history, Harvard trained, et cetera, et cetera. New book is called Conservative at the Core, A New History of American Conservatism. Let me welcome Professor Allan Lichtman. Hello to you, Dr. Allan Lichtman.
Great to talk to you again, Karen.
Great to have you. I know right after the election, you were like, I'm not doing any press.
That didn't last very long.
Yeah. So talk about, because we all had this pit in our stomach, like, not again. Y'all, really? Is this what we're gonna do for real? Is this it? How despondent were you over the results after knowing what you knew about why Kamala Harris should have won with everything being? What happened?
Yes, I was flabbergasted that Trump won. But very quickly, I developed two explanations. One, of course, once again, the Democrats screwed up, openly, viciously trashing their sitting president and their elected party nominee right out there in the open. You know, I'm 78. I go back to the Eisenhower administration. I've studied American politics since the founding. I had never seen anything like that before. And my hands are clean on that. I was the most vociferous critic at the time of what the Democrats were doing. Second, and more profoundly.
Wait. Sorry, Professor Lichtman, just remind folks. So the backdoor stuff with Nancy Pelosi and Obama and President Obama, and then what's his name? The actor George Clooney coming out with the New York Times piece, and but it was on the heels of that very, very horrible debate that we all watched and sat through like, Lord have mercy, why? So it wasn't out of just sheer nastiness that people were calling for President Biden to step down. It was that we all watched that debate and said, Jesus.
You know, I'm not a neurologist. I'm not a psychologist. There are explanations, I understand, for what happened there. It was one debate. You know, after that debate, he conducted many successful foreign trips. Before the debate, he had an incredibly successful State of the Union speech. But even if they felt he was not cognitively capable, there were far better ways of handling it than the Democrats did. That was really a disgrace.
I actually agree with you. I said he could not be breathing. I was going to vote for him. So let me just be clear. As I said in 2016, like Hillary Clinton could have the pizza parlor thing. I was still voting for her because I wasn't voting for Hillary Clinton. I was voting for the Supreme Court. I was very clear that there were, at that time, I said there's absolutely one, maybe two, maybe three seats. I was so right. I would start every show talking about the importance of the Supreme Court. 2016, I knew then what I know now, which is that, we're not electing people, we're electing levers of power for ourselves. We're voting for our own rights and resources. It's that simple. So Joe Biden didn't even have to be breathing for me to elect to cast a vote for him in November. That was irrelevant. And I think that message wasn't even cogently expressed, like what was on the line here.
You know, I have a show every Tuesday and Thursday with my son. We have 170,000 YouTube subscribers at Allan Lichtman YouTube. And I have been screaming about the Democrats for a couple of years now. And even before that, I've summarized American politics in one sentence. Republicans have no principles. Democrats have no spine.
Ooh.
And I think that says it all. Now, the other thing that I think derailed my prediction, which had been right for 40 years, The keys to the White House, my prediction system, are premised on the proposition that a pragmatic electorate makes a rational decision about the strength and performance of the White House party. Do they deserve 4 more years, or do the opposition deserve the next 4 years? That was torpedoed in this election, which I call the disinformation election. We've had disinformation throughout our history, but it exploded this time, particularly with Elon Musk, the richest man in the world, spending
Mhm.
hundreds of billions of dollars to disseminate blatant disinformation that, according to reports reviewed by over 2 billion persons, it affected everything, the economy, immigration, crime. And I'll leave you one example: abortion, the disinformation on abortion. According to the exit polls, the pro-choice position was about 35 points ahead of the pro-life position. That should have propelled Harris into an easy victory. But there was so much disinformation that her lead on abortion over Trump wasn't 35 points, wasn't 20 points, wasn't 10 points, wasn't 5 points, was only 3 points. Even if it had been 5 or 10 points, just a fraction of the gap, she would have won easily.
Is it possible? Because I haven't leaned into it because at this point, what does it matter? We're here now. But I'm hearing people like, why aren't you talking more about the stealing of votes? Now we've had Greg Palast on who talked about the voter suppression and how votes were thrown out. We literally saw ballot boxes on fire in, certain swing states. We know that Elon Musk and Starlink, because the baby told us Dad did something with the machines. Is it possible, Allan Lichtman, that they actually, unlike the 2020 Stop the Steal, they actually did steal this one?
I'm not going there. I'm not an expert in cybersecurity. I will say a number of my very smart audience, among my 170,000 subscribers, believe that, but without much more solid proof, that's not something I am going to pursue. And as you say, we're here now. Let's deal with the reality that we're facing. It's bad enough.
So how do we deal with it? Every day I'm tasked with opening up these airwaves and talking to millions of people all over this country and parts of Toronto and Canada and parts of Mexico, right? And this is a difficult conversation because we're in the belly of this thing where every day there's an executive order. And the problem is there's no House or Senate that can stop them because they got that lever. The Supreme Court's not going to stop them because he set 3 people to go along with Clarence Thomas and Sam Alito and John Roberts, who has no spine. He gave us Citizens United, by the way, under his watch, John Roberts. So it feels powerless. People are not in them streets the way they should be. The people who should be in them streets are not in them streets. Shouldn't be Black people on the front lines of this fight. It's your rights that are in your health care and your mama and daddy's Social Security. It's all of that that's on the line. But I feel like this is the time to double down on us. When I say us, I
Couldn't
mean
agree with you
people.
more. The
Okay.
fate of the American people is in their own hands. As you say, they're not going to be rescued by the Congress or the Supreme Court. And I'm in a moment talk about what I'm doing, but let me just say what I've advised my viewers to do. I've said there's got to be a multi-pronged strategy. Contact your congressmen, your senators, your local officials. Put pressure on them. Speak out at local meetings and forums. Write letters. Write op-eds. And as you say, vote with your feet. Get into the streets. And we are beginning to see that a bit more. And finally, of course, vote, organize other people to vote. One of the reasons Trump got in was a lot of progressives were sitting on their hands in 2024. And here's what I am doing. I have a show twice a week, and for the most part, my show is devoted to exposing the threats to our democracy, not just our democracy, but to our economic well-being and even our survival on the planet. They're destroying American healthcare. They are turning a blind eye or worse to climate change that threatens our well-being and our survival on the planet. I have been exposing that twice a week now ever since Trump came in. And then, of course, I've written this book, Conservative at the Core, A New History of American Conservatism, Notre Dame Press. It'll be out in a few weeks, September 1, in which I have pointed out that virtually all the commentary about Donald Trump and the Republicans is wrong. Donald Trump did not hijack conservatism. He's not an anti-conservative. He is the culmination of 100 years of conservatism. He is the
That's right.
logical extension,
That's
what
right.
we've been seeing since the end of World War One. And to say, the congressmen and the senators and the local officials are going along with him just because they're scared of him couldn't be more wrong. They're going along with him because they agree with
That's
him. They're
right.
part of this 100-year history
They
of American
crafted the
conservatism.
manifesto, and I think it goes back to Reconstruction, not just World War One.
Well,
I think,
yeah, I didn't go back that far, but
yeah,
of course you're right. But I did look at 100 years, sort of the modern conservative movement. The other point I make in Conservative at the Core that's so important is that conservatives do not truly represent what they claim to represent, that their so-called principles are just discardable ideas for public consumption. Let me give you an
that's right.
example. I think it was just yesterday or the day before. Trump said, the states are just agents of the federal government, and I can force them to do whatever I want. And yet, one of the supposed most sacred principles of conservatism is states' rights. How about
Correct.
personal morality and responsibility? Yeah, you laugh. It's
Yeah.
absurd. Free markets, since the Fordney-McCumber tariffs of the 1920s and the Smoot-Hawley tariff and now Trump's tariffs, they've torpedoed free markets. Fiscal responsibility, Trump is blowing a huge hole in the federal deficit. Limited government, what was the biggest intrusion on limited government? Go back to 1919, 1920, prohibition, which imposed big government upon all of the American people. Fast forward, what's the biggest intrusion on big government today? Not anything liberals are doing, what ICE is doing, terrorizing our communities, what they're doing on abortion rights, getting into our bedroom. So every one of those so-called conservative principles is completely discardable in the interest of their two real core principles that I outline in Conservative at the Core. One is the protection of private, not free enterprise, private enterprise through the tariffs, the special tax breaks, the subsidies, the loan guarantees, the attacks on unions. This is the favorable legislation. This has nothing to do with free enterprise and free markets. It has to do with the support of private enterprise and the quashing of workers. The other core principle that's been consistent is pursuing their version, and I stress that strongly, their version of supposed traditional Christian Judaic values. In fact, their version looks at the farthest fringes of Christian Judaic teaching, focusing on things like abortion, homosexuality, transgender, that almost don't figure at all in these religious teachings, while ignoring the overwhelming thrust of religious teachings, particularly the teachings of Christ, right? Who warns against wealth and greed. Remember, he said it's easier for a
Yes.
camel to go
To
through the
the
eye of
eye
a
of a
needle
needle.
than for a rich person to go to heaven. He
Right.
has taught the value of truth, the care for the stranger, the poor, the sojourner. These are the great truths of the Judeo-Christian tradition, not what the right wing is selling us. In effect, their politics are determining their religious teachings, not their religious teachings guided
Absolutely.
by religion. You know, Mike Johnson says, get my politics, just read the Bible. Well, I have read the Bible, and it couldn't be more at odds with his politics.
So that right there, the hypocrisy is so thick. And the evidence is right there. You just laid it out. We've been talking about that here. Why isn't it resonating? Why isn't it penetrating? Why isn't it separating bone from marrow? Why isn't it getting into the core of people? Is the media that powerful and that sold out and bought and paid for?
That's
Bezos,
part of it.
is that part of the
Yeah.
media is complicit?
The
And so we
media
don't have
is
any.
absolutely complicit. You know, they really have not dug deeply into the meaning of the American right and the conservative presidency. And to a great extent, they've given, a free ride to Trump. For weeks, the media harped on Joe Biden's alleged cognitive decline as if it was the story of the century. And yet they have not paid nearly as much attention to all of the ways in which Trump has attempted to obliterate our democracy, our health, our
And his cognitive
environment.
decline. The man can't walk in a straight line on a red
Well, that
carpet.
too.
He
Although
can't put
that's,
two
yeah,
cogent sentences together.
that
He
too.
is not. He can't read. Like this to
Yeah,
me.
and
It's an
he
abomination.
thought
Go ahead. I'm
Alaska
sorry.
was still in Russia. Remember, he said, I'm going to Russia to meet with Vladimir Putin. The other thing, of course, is, I've already said, the Democrats have not been correct, and liberals generally have not been courageous enough and have not developed effective messaging. One thing you've got to give Donald Trump and the right, they are brilliant at messaging. They're the greatest cons we have seen maybe in the history of the world, and they're not even close to being matched by the Democrats. It's been a
Well,
long time.
I think the Third Reich had a really good messaging propaganda system and filmmakers and things, and I think this is the blueprint that they got the blueprint from Jim Crow, and then took the blueprint, and then he's German, right? Trump is German.
Yes.
There's a connection there. I see there so many similarities between the rise of the Third Reich and what's going on in the United States of America right now, and that's the only thing that chills me because as people are rounded up. They just got rid of tent cities, and I know some of you really are okay with the homeless people being rounded up. But those are the first. They emptied the insane asylums in Germany, and they got rid of the people who they considered undesirables, the gypsies, and they put them in concentration camps. We're now sending people to countries that they're not from. They're disappearing. We don't know where they are. They're human beings. You may not like having to step over them or deal with them or the whatever blight that they bring into society. So you might be okay with people disappearing until it's your turn. And this is the thing, your turn will come.
Yes, I'm going to paraphrase Pastor Niemoller, the
Niemoller,
great
yes. Come
critic
on.
of the Nazis. I'm paraphrasing. He said, first they came for the communists, and I didn't care because I wasn't a communist. Then they came for the Catholics, and I didn't care because I wasn't Catholic. Then they came for the Jews, and I didn't care because I wasn't Jewish. And then they came for me. That's the horror. Once you start the process, there's no controlling it, and no one is safe.
So what do we do in that being the construct that we're currently under?
As I said, I've outlined the fivefold strategy. Get into the streets, pressure
Well,
elected
so let me just
officials.
pause you. Black
Yeah,
people have typically always been in the streets. We always are going to fight for the liberation of other
this is
people and
true.
ourselves. In this current construct with the police with their masks and there's no rule of law and there's no criminal justice system that would even favorably look. I know there's a lot of lawsuits being filed, but to me, being on the front lines is what they want. They want to test out all of these new equipments and all of these Proud Boys that they let out of prison that formed an insurrection that he pardoned and all. Like I think us being on the front lines, where are the white folk, Allan Lichtman?
Where do you what?
Where are the white folk? The people who identify as white who are suffering right now under the yoke of this current administration. Why aren't they in the streets in numbers that
Yeah,
they should be?
I'm speaking to them as loudly as I can. As I said, it's the Niemöller paradox. It still hasn't hit me the way it's hit Black people or so-called undocumented immigrants. And, you know, sometimes consciousness only arises when it becomes personal. But I've been doing the best I can to try to encourage, and I think my audience is probably, mirrors America. It's probably at least plurality, maybe majority white. I don't know. We don't check anything like that. But
Okay.
and it's coming
All right.
home soon.
All right.
Remember, this has only been 7 months. It
I
feels
know.
like
That's what I'm like. What?
years.
I'm, I'm
seven
preserving my
months. There's
peace
more
at
than
this
three
point.
years to go.
Shoot. Let's go to the phones. Allan Lichtman is here.
Yes.
His new book is Conservative at the Core. Let's go to Dave in Connecticut. Welcome to the Karen Hunter Show. Thank you for holding. Hi.
Hello, how are you?
Good. Hi. How
Yeah,
are
this is
you?
my first time calling.
Okay.
I've been listening and I'm, really enjoying what I'm hearing from the standpoint of it's very educational and revealing. That what I wanted to bring up was you talked about disinformation, Alan, earlier, which is a serious problem, especially today with the present technology, how fluid and how advanced and sophisticated technology is. However, from my perception, I think the bigger problem is we need to stop being lazy. When I say we, as a society, and educate ourselves and to be able to discern, that, hey, this is garbage, and
Yeah.
shut it down. But we have to just eat it up. If it
No,
comes across
but
my
Dave,
phone,
Dave,
I got
Dave,
it, Dave.
yeah,
And I
come on.
couldn't agree with
Yes.
you more, which is why I wrote this book, Conservative at the Core. It's why I'm on the great Karen Hunter Show to try to raise people's consciousness, educate them. It's why I go out of my way at age 78 to work hard and have a show every 2 weeks. I'm an academic, I'm an intellectual, and I'm trying to do what I think is the best service that an intellectual can do, and that is inform, inspire, and guide people.
Yeah, but Dave and Dr. Lichtman, we are also not paying attention to the reality that we have been anesthetized through technology, the phone, inundated with that, the dismantling of journalism, the replacement of journalism with social media. It's by design the way we teach children to regurgitate information, wrong or right, and their grade is based on their ability to memorize facts and dates and not critically think. This has been going on, the assault on our ability to process for the last couple of decades. And I know I used to be in the classroom. You've seen the decline. I know you have in the classroom of children that don't even read, let alone critically think. This is a crisis that is more pervasive than I think we can even imagine. And just to say people got to stop being lazy, that's not quite going to solve this in this time.
Yeah, no, that I don't berate people like that, but I do try to provide in as broad a context as I possibly can the best available information. I try to put everything in historical perspective so people can understand what's going on. Understanding is sort of the foundation of action. It doesn't necessarily spur action, but without that foundation, you are not going to get action. But Karen and Dave, you point out something very pernicious, and that is the digital media, which divides us into these watertight bubbles. The algorithms aren't interested in contradicting what you think or believe. They want to reinforce it. And, that's very powerful for the followers of Trump and people on the right because they're constantly being reinforced in their own ideas. And they are impenetrable to contrary ideas or information. Anything that challenges what they believe doesn't penetrate. Oh, that's just Biden. That's just the commies. That's just the left. That's just the lunatics. And I can't tell you, not so much anymore, but how many attacks, this kind of scurrilous nature I personally have experienced.
I can imagine. Well, I appreciate you coming in today, and I'm going to have an open invitation for you, Allan Lichtman, as we figure this out from now to the midterms and beyond. Well, I appreciate the work that you've done and that you continue to do. Conservative at the Core is the book. I appreciate you. I thank you. Check him out on YouTube as well. Allan Lichtman on YouTube. Come on back anytime.
Thanks, Karen. I appreciate it.
We're ready. We're prepared. Do not give in to fear. We are fearless. This is not the time to be afraid. This is a time to stand up and fight back and to resist any temptation for them to divide us. We're in this together. The rule of law is on our side. We will not give in, not give up. We will not capitulate. We will not bow. We will not bend. We will